Okay, so this is the first part of the notes which Steve has given me on the books we have in the collection relating to the work of Evelyn Underhill. So, the theology collection holds 5 works by the Anglican contemplative writer and spiritual director Evelyn Underhill. These are The Mystic Way from 1913, The Mystics of the Church from 1925, The Golden Sequence, a fourfold study of the spiritual life from 1932, Worship from 1936, and The Spiritual Life, 4 broadcast talks from 1937. In the biography section, there is also a collection of her letters, edited by Charles Williams, who's best known as the friend and collaborator of the Inklings, J.R.R. Tolkien and his circle. And this book of her letters includes a photo portrait of her as the frontispiece, taken in 1933. Evelyn Underhill's work emerged from a movement within the Church of England known as Anglo-Catholicism, sometimes called Tractarianism, from the title of the journal which most closely followed the thinking of this movement, Tracts for the Times. In simple terms, this was the part of the Church of England most sympathetic to the practice and teaching of the Roman Catholic Church. It was very conservative and was troubled by the perceived laxity within Anglicanism, instead looking back to the devotional qualities of the early church. Of course, it was Anglican spirituality and contemplative practice that influenced Evelyn Underhill most deeply, but her affinity with and sympathy for Catholicism was lifelong. At points, she was very close to joining that communion. Evelyn Underhill was born in 1875 and lived until 1941. It requires very little imagination to appreciate her social and political background in terms of 2 global wars, an uneasy peace, itself followed by a decade-long financial crisis. It was, on that level, a difficult and challenging life. The collection of letters reflect her most immediate responses and reflections to these events, but their primary focus is her own spiritual development and her contacts with friends and supporters, together with the management of her pastoral responsibilities. In contrast to the social and political turbulence, her personal circumstances were privileged, distinctly upper middle class, affluent with servants, houses, European travel, and, for a woman of the period, good educational opportunities. Of course, this in no way obviates the lifelong sincerity of her faith and practice. Her attraction to the Catholic Church, however, caused some turbulence. Her husband reflected the values and, some would say, the prejudices of his class, opposing her Catholic leanings, and she ended up remaining a lifelong Anglican. All of this contributed to her almost unique position and achievements. She was a woman writing for and within a conservative and traditional portion of her church and society. She exercised a vital ministry in recovering, advocating and teaching an almost lost practice within her church, that of contemplation or mysticism. In the context of Evelyn Underhill's work, mysticism refers to the practices, disciplines and beliefs which can lead to an individual to a more close personal experience of the divine. It takes inspiration from those members of the very early church who advocated a life of simplicity and who found God in light and silence, unmediated by priests or complicated ritual. This contemplative practice of prayer, fasting, examination and charity was, by the 19th century, largely only practiced in cloistered monastic communities. Underhill was instrumental in broadening its appeal. The overall tone of her writing, as well as its sheer beauty, is calm, reflective and orderly, with a light but deep touch. It's not without humour and is full of wisdom, empathy and compassion. It provides a deep insight into the human condition, especially in her pastoral letters of advice and guidance. Her scholarship and the attendant research is worn lightly, but this in no way detracts from the final effect. She took the contemplative life out of the nunnery, the monastery and the seminary and almost single-handedly gifted it on a high level to the everyday church community, as well as to a far broader range of clergy, both inside and outside traditional Catholic circles. Through her work, name after name, saint after saint, right back into church history, were recovered, revived and placed in contemporary use. And I shall now show you the books that we've got in our collection, which Evelyn Underhill wrote.